Okay, so we just finished with the basics of factoring. So now let's start putting it into its proper use. So let's look down at number 21 in your note packet. So for number 21, we are still factoring. So I still have to figure out what the greatest common factor is going to be. However, here's the difference. It's set equal to 0. So in this case, not only are we going to factor, but then we're going to step into the zero product property. So let's do the first thing. So we just learned how to do factoring. So I look at it and go, oh, I can take out, in this case, we look at it and say 2, but if you divide 52 by 2, you get 26. So that tells me I can take out another even number, and in this case, it's going to be a 4. So we know a 4 is going to come out. Now, the largest exponent that I can take out is z to the first because that is my smallest exponent. So we're going to take out 4z. Now, take out means divide. So 4 and 4 drop, leaving me a z behind. Plus, now when you divide 4 into 52, we get 13. And the z's are going to cancel. Now, this is going to look like basically the first half of the assignment that we had, which was a zero product property. So let's refresh since it was just a little bit ago that we went through this. So remember, we're going to set each one of them equal to 0. And remember, these two are held by multiplication, so that's why this rule is called the product property. So 4z equals 0. And z plus 13 equals 0. So divide 4 into z, you're going to get z equals 0 because anything divided into 0 is 0. Now remember, when we're doing the solving, you do the opposite operation. So the opposite of addition is subtraction. So I subtract over my 13 and I get negative 13. Recall when we talked about it the first time that you have to rewrite it with the smallest first and then your next larger one. Yeah, I know it seems trivial, but what happens is this is going to help you find out solutions when we start talking about story problems. All right, so let's do one more. Let's look at number 23. So number 23 is written different. So it is 22s equals 11s squared. So what's happening here is that we have to take and get everybody on the same side. So in factoring, it's not just about what you can take out, it's also about the setup of the problem. Is everyone on the same side of the equal sign? Okay, to figure that out, you should have 0 equals something or something equals 0. In this case, I have 22s equals 11s squared. So there's a mistake somewhere, or we just need to rewrite. And in this case, it's a rewrite. So we want to keep the s squared positive. So the 11 in front must stay positive, or it's going to cause us some sign issues later. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract the 22s across. So when I do that, I get 0 equals 11s squared minus 22s. Now, we're ready to factor. Once again, what can we take out? The largest common factor. Well, remember this is an s in this, so please be careful you don't think it's a 225. It's actually 22s. Well, we're going to take out an 11 because they both are multiples of 11, and we can take one s out. So 11s parenthesis, and I got to remember to put my 0 there because here in a moment that'll make a difference. The 11s cancel, leaving an s behind, minus the s's cancel, leaving a 2. So I have 11s equals 0, and I have s minus 2 equaling 0. So when I divide both sides by 11, s equals 0. And when I add 2 across, s equals 2. All right. So we have these two here, so let's put it into a word problem. So that's the last thing I want to work on is number 25. So number 25, we are looking at the ball being kicked in the air. Now, this is something that we will use more in Algebra 2, but this gets you warmed up into these type of story problems because next year you will actually have this on your I-STEP before you even get into your Algebra 2. So number 25 says, a boy kicks a ball in the air. The height y in feet above the ground of the ball is modeled by the equation. And the equation is y equals negative 16 x squared plus 80x. So let's talk about what these numbers represent. Where x is the time in seconds since the ball was kicked. So the x represents time. Y is going to represent the feet. So one thing when we're looking for this, remember, a lot of times when we solve, we find what x is, but then to get the answer, we have to plug it back in. So the next thing we need to know is what those numbers represent. Well, negative 16 is a constant. That is something that is always going to be used when you're talking about something with an arch, launch and landing, because it's gravity. 80 is the initial velocity. In other words, how hard or how much it is driven. So it's basically the inertia behind it to get it going. And if there's ever a number behind the 80x or after the x, then that has to do with how high up it is off the ground. So each one have a reason for being there. So in this case, I just want to say that when the roots of the equation are set equal to 0. So in other words, when I have 0 for y, so if you put 0 in for y, we're going to treat it the same as we did with 21 and 23. Bigger numbers, easier stakes. Now you can do it one of two ways. You can move the negative 16 across and the 80, or what you could do here is just take and pull out a negative. So negative 16 is going to come out, and they are also an x coming out. So negative 16 divides into negative 16, leaving me an x. Negative into a positive is negative. 16 goes into 80 5 times. And of course, the x's cancel. So when is the time in which the ball is on the ground is basically what we're asking. Well, when you first kick it, which is 0, because negative 16 divided into 0 is 0, and the other one is when it comes down 5 seconds later and lands on the ground. So the two solutions is going to be 0 and 5. And yes, folks, you may have two solutions because remember, the ball being on the ground to begin with is a starting point. All right, that's the end of this lesson. And if you have further questions, please contact me.